All right, so let's get started. Hello, everyone. This is Naman, and I cheerfully welcome you all to one of the very astounding journey that we are going to embark upon. Yes, you can see directly on the board that we are going to embark on a beautiful and very astounding journey of international relations. So let's be on the board and see what the journey has to give to each and every one of us for UPSC preparation and also for all of the geeks like me who are interested in the international relations and various unfolding in this particular domain, right? So this is the time of Amrit Kal, and this is very auspicious moment for each and every one of us to have a well-grounded awareness when it comes to international relation, right? So as you can see on the board that the international relation basically constitute as a two part in our UPSC journey. One, it is a part of PSIR syllabus, and second, it is a part of our GS paper number 2, that is quality and IR section. All right, GS paper number 2, right? One of the good thing about international relation part is that we do not have to go through all this bunch of books, right? As in the case with various subjects like GS paper number 1 and etc. and etc. The IR part imbibed in GS paper number 2 is very precise. It is very clearly elicited with a clear demarcation, right? So let's have a quick look of whatever GS paper number 2 of IR is prescribing to the aspirants of UPSC, right? So the first topic which the GS paper number 2 comprises of when it comes to IR is India and its neighborhood, right? The relation that we share with our neighborhoods, right? As we can see the evaluation from the look east policy to act east policy, right? If you guys are on newspaper on regular basis, then you might be knowing that how the present government of honorable Prime Minister Sri Narendra Modi and very shrewd uh, foreign affairs minister, that is honorable Sri S Jaishankarji, how they are very politically realistic when it comes to our neighborhood, right? From Pakistan to Nepal to Bhutan to down south, right? Like Sri Lanka, Maldives, and etc. Right? We have seen a recent happening with our countries when it comes to Maldives, right? Not so friendly relation. All right. So this is what is the relation that we are going to shape with our neighborhood, right? And that is why UPSC also gives a lot emphasis on India and its neighborhood that we are going to see in our course of journey, in our course of lecture. All right. So the next topic is bilateral, regional, and global groupings, right? So recently, last year, we have a very opulent conduct of G20 summit in Bharat Mandapam in New Delhi, right? We have seen that it was one of the very successful global groupings that India succeeded to bring into our country, right? The various delegates from across the world in order to promote our national interest, our national product, our national symbolism to the entire world. So that is how it is important, and the global groupings like G20, SARC, BIMSTEC, and etc. that has to play a key role when it comes to the promotion of our national interest, right? That is why UPSC has put into the syllabus the topic of bilateral, regional, and global groupings and agreements that we will be unfolding in our course of discourse. All right. The third topic is effect of policies and politics of developed country and developing countries on India's interest and especially Indian diaspora. Right. So India is a world largest uh, country when it comes to diaspora. Right. So we have the concept of NRIs, right? That is non-resident non-resident Indians, right, who are basically living abroad for their employments and etc. And also the people who have Indian overseas citizens, right? Indian overseas citizens. So we as a India have our greater interest in Indian diaspora in today's time as compared to any of the previous times or phases of IR, right? So recently, if you might be aware, then Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the ex-president of United States have jointly conducted Howdy Modi event in the United States, right? So what was the significance of such a grandiose uh, events, right? Like Howdy Modi, than the one we have in Australia itself, right? So these are some of the very, very important happenings and the significance of the Indian diaspora, that even the very, very important leaders around and across the world, like Joe Biden to Donald Trump to Scott Morrison in Australia, then Japan, and etc. and etc. They are realizing and coming in terms with, right, that we cannot neglect the Indian diaspora who are living in the respective countries, right? That is why it becomes very, very important for each and every one of us, the citizens, and also the diplomats, and also the government, to safeguard the interest of Indian diaspora. So these are just the crux that we will be unfolding in our course of lecture. All right. Then there is a topic known as important international institutions, agencies, and forums, right? Their structure and mandate, right? So international institutions like United Nations, right? United Nation Organization. Then we have WTO, that is World Trade Organization, International Monetary Funds, and etc. Right? So these are some of the international institutions, agencies that we will be seeing in our course of lecture. There has been a particular emphasis upon their structure and mandate that we will be seeing. So this is what the more or less our GS paper number 2 when it comes to IR looks like. All right. I'm hoping that you guys are getting the understanding of IR, and this is what the glimpse will look like, right? So what will be the our structure when it comes to GS paper number 2 IR part, right? So basically we will be seeing three very important structure, right? So our approach will basically comprise of the context, right? The context, then we will be seeing the concepts, then the CA, that is current affairs part of it, right? So why context is important, right? Context is basically constitution of the historical backgrounds, historical backgrounds that have shaped the concepts, right? That have shaped the concepts in particular manner. All right. So let's say if World War One happened in the 20th century, right? What was the context of World War One? The historical backgrounds, right? So we also study some facets of context in our world history as well, right? So that is what is the importance of context and how important it is for us, the IR student, to understand in order to grasp and understand the concept in its wholesome manner. All right. So let's say the major events of the world, right, from World War One to World War Two to the Cold War era, Suez Canal crisis, and etc. and etc. मैं अगर if I tell you directly what is World War One, why, what are the countries, which are the countries where who were involved in World War One, and etc. and etc. Right? If I just storify the World War One, you might not understand until and unless you know the context of it, right? That why World War One happened or unfolded the way it unfolded, right? In 1914 to 1919, roughly, right? Where we will be basically seeing the stance of Germany, the Austria-Hungary, and etc. Right? That is why it becomes important, it becomes very, very imperative important for us to know and understand the context. Then we will be seeing the concept, right? From there the concepts like League of Nation, right, by Woodrow Wilson, the United States president, who has enlisted few charters, right, few rules that the countries must oblige to in order to have a peace, in the world, right? And during those years especially, peace was peace was certainly an exigency. Peace was certainly an exigency of those times, right? That is why Woodrow Wilson, the then president of United States, had enlisted few charters, few obligations of the world, and he prescribed that everyone should obliged to this list of charters, this list of rules, in order to have peace in the world, in order to have harmony in the world, right? So this is how important the context is in order to understand the concept, right? And we will be complementing our context and concepts with the current affairs part of it, because simultaneously we need to keep our eyes open. We need to keep our eyes open when it comes to the global happening around the world, right? We certainly need to keep our eyes open, our ears open, in order to have a pitch on whatever is happening around us and around the world, and we will keep on connecting the concepts with the current affairs, right? We will always follow a 2C's formula, right? 2C's formula, that is concept plus current affair. If India is signing a deal with United States, right, to a particular a strategic deal with the United States, what is the context behind it, right? Where are we looking at, right? If India is talking about ISET, what is the intention of both the countries involved in the ISET agreement, right? So we need to understand the context plus concept, then we will be able to understand the the happenings more fully, more holistically. All right, so with this let's see what will be the our approach, right? What will be the our approach when it comes to dealing with the IR section, right? So we will be basically starting with the historical background, right? So here we will have to make a clear demarcation that we will not be talking about the world history. We will not be talking about the world history. We will basically limiting ourselves to the history that is related to the IR, that is related to the IR, and that is sufficient, which is sufficient for understanding the concept that we are going to delve ourselves into, right? So this is what is the historical background that we will be delving ourselves into, right? Then we will be seeing India's foreign policy development, right? Where we will basically be seeing the definition of foreign policy. What is foreign policy? We will be seeing various determinants of foreign policy, right? What are the important determinants of foreign policy? From military power to economic power to political stability to trade, commerce, financial credit of the countries, and etc. These are some of the important determinants of the foreign policy, right? So we will be seeing what foreign policy is, what is the definition, and various determinants, right? Then we will be seeing the foreign policy development of our country, that is India, right? From the colonial time to the British era to the independent India's, from Nehruvian to the present day Modi government, how the foreign policy has evolved, how it has taken shape, right? And today we are sounding very heard. We are sounding very loud when it comes to promoting our national interest in international fora, right? So there has been a historical evolution that has been taken into shape, that has been taken into consideration in during various time, which has ultimately led to the foreign policy that we have today. All right, so the third approach will be India's relation, right? The syllabus part, basically we will be seeing India's relation with our neighbors and various powers around the world, right? Then we will be seeing important global groupings, right? From G20 to G7 to SARC, BIMSTEC, and etc. Right? Then we will be seeing international organization, various international organizations like UN, WTO, uh, then IMF, World Bank, AIIB, SARC, and etc. Right? Then ultimately we will be dealing with the Indian diaspora, which will basically constitute various facets like political, economical, technological, cultural, and various facets of Indian diaspora in the countries abroad. All right. So this is be our approach when it comes to IR part of GS paper number 2. All right. I'm hoping that you guys are getting the concept well. All right. So now let's get started with the historical background. All right, historical background, especially in the 20th century, right? How was the India in 20th century? What was happening around the world which has shaped the international relation and the facet around it, right? So we are basically going to see the world history of 20th century, right? So you might be aware, you might have read the enough of spectrum. If not, then you at least have read few of the historical textbooks in your 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and etc., right? So there we knew how powerful the Britishers were, right? How powerful the Britishers were. Why? Because of their IR, that is Industrial Revolution, right? So there was a concept, there was a terminology which was very famous and used, was Pan Britannica. What is Pan Britannica? Pan Britannica is a term. If you Google, you will find that the major source of security, the major center of security of the world was Britain, right? The Great Britain, right? The England, the UK that we know today, right? As in today's context, the major power center is United States now, right? So today we are having the concept of pan Americana, pan Americana, pan Americana, right? Similarly, we had the concept of pan Britannica, right? Here, Americana, here during this time, during the time of pan Britannica, the America was under the isolation, right? It was not so open as we see America today, right? Very, very active in trade, commerce, defense, economy, technology, and etc. During the phase of pan Britannica, when America got its independent and etc., America chose to remain under the isolation, right? Under the isolation, that is, they followed a policy known as Iron Curtain. Iron Curtain. Iron Curtain, right? So if you will look at the geography of America, right? Geography of this entire America, which basically comprise of the two continents, that is North America and South America, their geography is geographically and strategically isolated from the entire world, right? They can choose to remain disconnected from the entire world, right? So this is what is the strategic benefit, geographic benefit that America had, right? And that is why post attaining her independence, America chose to remain under the isolation, under the policy of Iron Curtain, right? So sir, what did they do under isolation, right? Because in today's time the countries cannot survive under the terms of isolation, right? Because if you know the concept of autarky, what is autarky? Autarky is a economy which is self-sufficient, right? A basic German concept, right? A Nazi economic ideal, right? So this particular concept of autarky is still considered to be an idealistic idea, an idealistic idea. Why? Because no country can survive in the self sufficiency, right? No country is a self sufficient. We need to depend on someone else to fulfill our demands, right? If country A can produce the good X, the country B will produce product Y, right? And they both will exchange with each other in order to satiate their demands, right? So this is what is the dependent economy. This is what is the economy of economists like Adam Smith and David Ricardo and etc., right? We are not going into the economic here. We will be limiting ourselves to the IR. Just for the knowledge purpose, I am saying here is that no country can remain self what can remain under isolation because of its dependency on other countries, right? But still USA chose to remain under isolation, under Iron Curtain, right? So when they were under isolation, they tried building their internal matters, right? What does this mean, right? They mainly focused on economy, they mainly focused on resources, right? They mainly focused on trade, commerce, they mainly focused on defense, right? Because even USA was under the colonial rule, right? Where the Britishers have kind of exploited US, right? Exploited America, right? They have completely eliminated, executed the Native Americans, right? That is why they have realized how important it is to be internally strong, how important it is to be defensively strong, right? So that is where they started preparing under isolation, right? So till the very advent of World War One, around 1915, right? 1914 to 1919 is the time when they chose to open themselves, right? When they saw a threat, right? Which was basically due to the European wars, right? Is posing a vulnerability, is posing a threat on the American continent. They have came up to defend themselves and also safeguard the interest of their people, right? This is where USA came up openly in the public, right? So before those times, before US, pan Britannica was the major source of global security, right? As you can see in the picture, a Spanish man is standing with the cannons, right? demanding from the people of the world that free Cuba or else we will shoot, right? So this was what the policy of the Britishers, of policy of the Europeans were. They always resorted to the power in order to exploit, right? So this is what is the policy of imperialism. This is what was the policy of colonialism was all about, right? We will be saying what this particular terminology means in our course of lecture, don't worry. This is just a imperialism, a colonialistic idea that Britishers were fulfilling, right? They were fulfilling the interest, the coffers of the Britain, right? So during those times Asian powers were under decline, right? So Asian powers like China, Japan, India, and etc., we were under very, very grave decline, right? India, once regarded as the golden sparrow, golden sparrow during her independent, almost 70% of our population was under poverty, right? And this is what was the condition that we were brought under the Britishers rule, right? We were mainly treated as a colony of the British, right? Which were mainly to satisfy their thirst of raw material, right? So basically, what was the story? Basically, Britain has undergone the Industrial Revolution, IR, right? If you might be aware, then you might be knowing the period of Renaissance, right? Where the science emerged, right? Science emerged from the religion, right? Science emerged and the religion taken a back step in the Europe, right? From Renaissance developed IR, Industrial Revolution, right? Where the advent of steam engine, right? Steam engines got developed. Because of steam engine, the horsepower manifolded, multifolded itself. Then there was a several boost in the production capabilities, right? But Europe is not so much abundance with the resources, right? So the monarchical charter, or the king or the queen's charter, right? The papal bulls and etc. of Portugal, Spain, and etc., they have said that people of Europe go and explore around the world, right? And if you find any resources, you exploit that particular area and send the resources to the Europe, and you will get the money for that, right? You can own, you can rule those particular colony of the Europe, colony of the any particular country, right? So this is what was the imperial policy of the European monarchy, right? And because of that, India also fallen as a prey to the European colonialism, right? So colonialism reaching the climax. Almost all of Africa, Asia, South America were under the colonial rule in the 20th century, right? So we are basically talking about the 20th century. 20th century is the time where all these things were happening, right? It was a time of Pan Britannica, where like Britain was at its climax, right? When it comes to power. So if you might be aware of Indian history, there were several colonial power that came to India, right, in order to establish their supremacy. But at the end, the Britain powers survived. They could sustainably rule us, right? So this is what that shows the power of Britain, right? Britain had the maximum number of colony around the world, right? It was said that the sun never sets in Europe. The sun never sets in Britain, right? Never sets in Britain. Britain. What does this mean that the sun never sets in the Britain? Britain had very large number of colonies, right? So if there is a night in Britain, there is a day in some other colony of the Europe, right? Like India. That is why it was said that the sun never sets in Britain. This shows the hegemony, this shows the supremacy of the Britain, which was there in the 20th century, right? So colonial rule, the major agenda of the colonial rule was the one-way trade, right? The major goal or aim of colonial rule was one-way trade. What is one-way trade? Basically sending raw materials from the colonies to the Europe, and getting the finished good and selling at the higher prices, right? So this is what was the main aim of the colonial rule during the 20th century. All right, so I'm hoping that you guys are getting the concept. All right, then this was all happening very, very peacefully. This was all happening very, very peacefully until there was World War One, right? The Till the advent of World War One, everything was happening very, very peacefully. Europe was making humongous amount of money. Europe was stricken with many, many diseases like measles, black fever, and etc. People were dying. They were getting destroyed. They were getting deteriorated due to various illnesses, no food, poverty, and etc. They started running as a cash machine, right? There was a humongous inflow of cash in the Europe all of a sudden, right? So there is a famous saying that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely, right? And how power comes? Power comes with money. Power comes with money, right? The muscle comes with money, right? Muscle comes with money. All right. So this is what is the adage. This is what is the basis of the world war. When there was a sudden inflow of money in the Europe, people started very, very greedy about the money and the power, right? There was a power rush in the Europe. There was a power rush in the Europe, right? Suddenly the countries who were at the backstage like Germany and etc., they also came forward to claim to chase the colonial run, right? They also started to occupy several colony in the Africa and etc., right? Because of this, what happened? There was a sense of jealousy. There was a sense of rivalry that developed within the countries of Europe, right? Like France, Britain, Germany, right? So it is like if a person is well established in the market, if a person is well established in the market, he will never let a person be to occupy the position he has in the market or in the place, right? You might be aware of the most powerful person in your city. He will never allow any other power to take the position that he enjoys, right? So this is what is the context, right? So countries like Britain, France, Spain, Portugal, and etc., they were the major powers. They were the major hegemonic powers of the Europe, right? But all of a sudden, what started happening? There were several powers that started emerging and clashing for the multipolarity or the power sharing, right? Like Germany, Austria, Hungary, and etc. Poland, right? They were the countries. They also started to chase a dream of colonialism, right? They started thinking, if Britain is occupying the whole world and exploiting the resources, why can't Germany do the same, right? So when this power greed taken over them, that is where this all big situation started to take shape, right? Which costed more than 20 million lives around the Europe, right? So let's see what happened, right? So again, we are just having a crux in order to understand the things which are important for the IR. All right. So world war. Okay. So it was basically European war turned into the global war, right? So when we say world war, right, we basically tend to think that it was a war of the world, right? And there are almost 190 countries in the world, right? So if we say world war, it is quite possible that we tend to assume that it was a war between all of the 190 world, right? Among the 190 countries, right? They are fighting among themselves, right? Or there is a team of how like there is a team of, let's say, 95 and 95 countries on each side, right? And they are fighting among themselves, right? But this is not the reality. So world war was basically a European war, right? So this is a kind of skewedness. The entire Europe, अगर आप ये नक्शे में देखेंगे, so it is this part, right? This part is the Europe, right? And there was a power tussle which was happening in this part. In this part, this is basically the UK, United Kingdom, right? This is basically roughly France, right? This will be Italy or something. This will be Germany. This will be Austria, Hungary, right? And this will be countries. Here will be Poland, and etc. and etc. Roughly, right? So these were the major epicenter of the wars, right? These places were the majors. Here is a Russia, all right, the former USSR, right? So these were the major epicenter of the wars, right? Where majorly war happened, and majority of the war, even UK, in the geography of the UK, the war it has taken shape, but not at the intensity that has unfolded in this particular mainland Europe, right? But still, the Europe had this egoistic attitude that we are the world, right? The world is the West, right? This is what is the North mindset, right? The global North mindset. They tended to see their problem as the world problem, right? But they never considered the South's problem as the world problem, right? So recently, in one of the conferences, Honorable External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar said that this is the major problem of the Europe, right? This is the colonial mindset that Europe has to come out of, right? Europe basically considers their problem as the world problem, but it is not otherwise, right? So the war in the Europe considered it as the world war, right? But it was not true. It was majorly a European war, though it has a cascading, it has a spillover effect on the entire globe. Why? Because entire globe was the directly or indirectly under the colonial rules, right? So this was the premise of the World War One. All right. So colonial World War One, the major cause of World War One was colonial distribution, right? Power remained with Britain but under pressure, right? So this was the major cause, right? Then came World War Two, right? Again, World War Two for the European supremacy, right? So there was two power. Majorly, we all might be knowing about the Axis power and Allied power, right? The US, Britain, and etc., France, Russia, and etc., they all were the allies, right? The ally, the NATO that we know in today's time. That way, they were formerly the allies, right? Then USA came out of isolation, right? And nuclear bomb basically ends the war, the Hiroshima and Nagasaki nuclear bombing, right? So it is one of the very, very bleak day, very, very dark day of our human history, right? So this is where the might of the USA has been established in the globe, right? That now there is a USA, there is a concept of pan Americana, right? Pan Americana, the hegemony, the concept of Pan Britannica was challenged. Pan Britannica was challenged in the World War Two, right, where there was a major challenge to the European powers, right? They could not keep their home in order. How they will make sure that there is a peace and harmony in the world, right? This is how it was a major knock on the face of the European powers, and that is where the USA came out of isolation by showing their nuclear military might and bombing Japan, right? So with this, the Pan Britannica ends, right? So finally, the Pan Britannica ends with the Suez Canal crisis in 1956, where the Egypt, Al Nasser, the premier of Egypt, they finally quashed the British and their ownership of Suez Canal and basically nationalized the Suez Canal, where more than 50% of the global trade used to pass, right? So this was the final blow to the Britain's supremacy, right? And it was unchallenged. So a leader of a very, very emerging developing countries like Egypt, right? He finally chose to end the British ownership, right, by nationalizing the Suez Canal crisis, a Suez Canal company, right? So it was a final blow to the Britain, right? And even ultimately, US supported this idea, right? So this is how in the Suez Canal crisis, during the Suez Canal crisis, and with the Suez Canal crisis, the concept of Pan Britannica got full stop. Right, it was completely eliminated. It was completely destroyed. People of the world, they realized, they came to the terms that yes, now Britain is no more the source of the global security. Right? So here on, the USA emerged as a new superpower, right? Soon challenged by USSR, right? Here a bipolar world order emerged, right? Why bipolar world order? Because there are two power in the pole, right? One side there is a USA, other side there is a USSR, right? And there was a mainly an ideological difference between two, right? So USA was mainly driven by the liberal ideology of the world. Then USSR was mainly driven by the socialist ideology, right? And there was a power tussle which was happening between the two powers of the world, which ultimately led to the Cold War, right? That we will be seeing in our course of lecture. All right. So this is what is the history in the 20th century looks like, right? So All right. So after the major tussle between the USA and USSR, so how does the evolution is taking shape, right? So there was basically Britain, right? Britain, which was basically holding the power. All right. So there was Britain. From Britain came USA, right? Again, USA during World War II. The USA power was challenged by USSR, right? But between USA and USSR, there was never a war to decide the hegemony or supreme power, right? That is why there was a Cold War between both of them. They physically never fought, USA and USSR never fought on ground, but they always engaged in a proxy war, proxy war, right? So we will be seeing what all these things are, right? But main difference between USA and USSR is their ideological difference, right? Ideological difference. What is ideological difference? If USA was mainly the propounder of liberal ideology, right, the free market economy and etc., USA was majorly a supporter of a socialist order, right? So as you can see in this particular picture, you can see Uncle Sam holding a wallet, holding a sack of money and etc., looking rich. At the same time, there is a socialist order. You can see a bear with the iron clasp on the hand. You can see red salam and etc. and etc. Right. So this is what is the depiction of capitalism and socialism. Right. Socialism is mainly driven by there will be a state which will be controlling the a major majority of the resources and ensuring that there is an equal distribution among the people, which is ultimately leading to the non-accumulation of the wealth, right? Which is basically solving the problem of wealth inequality, right? But uh, again, this is the ideology which has failed, that we will be seeing our course of lecture, right? With the final disintegration of USSR, it has been realized that no, socialism is the ideology that could not survived internationally as it was done by the liberalism, right? So this is what is the ideological war that was between the USA and USSR, right? So which ultimately led to a Cold War, right? They never fought in physical terms, but there was always a sense of agony. There was always a sense of cold jealousy between both of them, right? Which led to the spread of nuclear weapons, global forces, and etc. Right? If USSR developed their nuclear weapon, uh, it was again done by the USA as well, right? They also developed their nuclear weapons and also, right? So if Russia is doing so, if US is doing so, why Russia is not doing, right? If my competitor, if my let's say if there is a cold war between me and my friend, if my friend is having 10 rupees pen, how can I have 5 rupees pen? I will also have a 10 rupees pen. So this is what was the happening, which led to the advent of several heinous, several very dangerous weapons like nuclear weapons, global forces, arms, military equipments, and etc. Right, and this is how they also became one of the major source of defense. Right, so if we take into consideration our own military and defense condition, majority of the time we tend to import majority of the defense materials and equipment from the countries like US and USSR. Right, this is the resultant of Cold War, right? There was a huge sense of competition between both the major powers of the world, that is USA and USSR, which led to the myriad of defense spreads and proliferation in the market, right? So the smaller nations, right, they joined different blocks, right? So there was two blocks, that is USA and USSR, right? USA and USSR. So the major European countries, majority like of the European countries like Britain, France, and etc., they all joined the US bloc. At the same time, the countries like China, Vietnam, Korea, and etc., they all Cuba and etc., they all joined the USSR bloc, right? Who were mainly driven by the socialist tendencies, right? So this is how the smaller nations, they joined the different bloc, right? They got their material and security benefits, but at the end their sovereignty was compromised. How their sovereignty was compromised? Because USA and USSR being a leader of the bloc, they started controlling the sovereign matter of the countries who were under the part of their blocks, right? So if, let's say, country X is a part of NATO, country X is a part of NATO, and there is a danger on country X cannot act in the matter it deems fit, right? Country X will not take the action which he or she thinks is important for country X. Here the leader, that is US, will decide what country X will do. If country X will not follow the dictum of US, then in the case if there is a war on X, US will not come in support, right? That is what was the situation. That is why the smaller nations which joined the major power, they got the material and security benefits, but their sovereignty was the compromised. Why? Because they were under the dictum, they were under the rule of their leaders, right? So India with others gave alternate path of non-alignment, right? So we chose under our prime minister, honorable prime minister Sri Jawaharlal Nehru. He propounded the idea of non-alignment, right? So if, like, countries, we were freshly gotten our independence, right, from the colonial powers, and we were in very, very worse situation, right? So we needed both the material and economic security and also sovereignty, right? Why? Because our situation was very, very different from the countries, from the western countries, right? So if we might have joined the our blocks, then our sovereignty would have been compromised. We would not have been taken the decision which is suited for our country or the advancement of our nation, right? That is why countries like India, Egypt, South Africa, and etc., we have chose to stay non-aligned with the major power blocks. At the same time, we also engaged in the domain, in the trade, commerce, economy with the countries which was very, very aptly suited for the development or the advancement of our interest, right? So this is what is the non-alignment. And there was also a thing known as non-alignment movement that we will see in the lecture, right, just in today's lecture. So I'm hoping that you guys are understanding the concept. If you guys are getting a little bit bored or something, just hold a pen and a note in your hand and start writing things, because you will start remembering things much better if you do in so manner. All right. So these are just the story, friends, right? Like, I don't know how your reactions are, but I'm literally believing, trusting that if you are ardent lover of IR, international relation, then you might be finding it very, very interesting to know, right? And today is just the history, might be a little bit outdated, a little bit not interesting as well, but we need to bear with this. Why? Because we need to build our own set of context in order to understand the concept well, right? uh, and so let's move further. All right, let's move further. Now we are entering into 21st century, right? We have seen the 20th century, Pan Britannica, Pan Americana, then the major blocks like USA, USSR, then the Cold War, various proliferation of defense, security, economy, etc., right? Then the advent of 21st century is happening, is taking shape, right? When we talk about 21st century, we are basically talking of the period from 2000, from 2001 to roughly 2100, right? And when we talk about 20th century, it is basically 1901 to roughly 2000, right? So this is what is the time span we are talking about, right? So with the fall of USSR, right? So there was a fall of USSR, right? There was a, if the, again, USSR is an union of Soviet Socialist Republic, 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 right? So geographically, what you see in today's Russian continental part, right, which basically constitutes the Russia, then countries like Ukraine and etc., they were formerly the part of USSR, right? They were basically the Union of Soviet Socialist Republic, right? But Again, there was an event in 1991 known as the fall of Berlin Wall, right? And with fall of Berlin Wall, people have finally decided to delete the concept of USSR, right? And this particular geographical national concept or entity of USSR finally got fragmented with the powers like Russia, then came Ukraine, Czechoslovakia, Slovakia, and etc. and etc. Right? Being the matter of the fact is that Russia was holding the major power. It was the most powerful country geographically, resourcefully, economically, and etc. The Russia was given the final importance, right? Russia was given more importance, and Russia was also given a veto power, right? A permanent member of the UN Security Council, right? One of the member in the P5, that is permanent five, right? That is why with the fall of USSR, the advent of 21st century is symbolically deciphered in the language of IR, right? And with this, there was a victory of liberalism, right? Why? Because there was two powers, right? As we know, there was a two power blocks, right? The competition between two powers, that was USA and USSR, right? USA was mainly following the liberal ideology. At the same time, USSR was more socialistically inclined, right? So with the fall of USSR or the Berlin Wall, the socialist ideology got weakened, right? It is not completely destroyed or deleted, because we still know some countries like Russia, China, they are the successful examples of socialist countries, right? But with this, there was a victory of liberalism as the ideology in the world, right? There are more followers of liberalism than the socialism, right? So shortly after fall of USSR, there was world under unipolarity of US. What is unipolarity of the US? US became once again a major source of power, right? Economic, military, technological, and etc. Political and etc. Right? USA became a unipolar power in the world, right? So what it led to? It led to the accelerated globalization, right? So as we know, our 1991 reforms, 1991 LPG reforms, right? Liberalization, privatization, and globalization, right? This was the mainly consequence of accelerated globalization. How the international institutions like World Bank, IMF, and etc. They were basically the USA's machinery uh, to promote liberalism in the world, right? They started coaxing the countries like India to follow the LPG reforms, right? So that was the basically agenda of United States and the enforcement of its unipolar power of the world, right? So economic interconnectedness and global institutionalism was the final result of the globalization, right? So again, US hegemony was challenged by the various terrorist group in the Middle East, right? Like we know Al Qaeda, Mujahideen, and etc. Right. So these are some of the terrorist group which challenged the US hegemony. Right. We know the attack of 9/11. Right. So again, with the challenge to the US hegemonic power, there was a emergence of middle powers. Right. Middle powers like China, India, then Brazil, and etc. UAE, and etc. This middle powers started to emerge, right? So China's aggressive rise challenging US hegemony and global multipolarity, right? So when there was a US hegemonic challenge by the terrorist group, there was a China which mainly started to emerge in the world stage economically, right? We have seen the major growth of China's economically, right? And now today's China is one of the major hegemonic power when it comes to economy and trade, right? China is the second largest economy of the world after United States, right? So this is how it was a challenge to the US hegemony post challenges by the terrorist organization, right? So now you will see a pattern here, right? I'm not just telling you a story. You will see a patterns here, right? So there is a power, right, which is challenged by the rival, which is leading to the emergence of new power, right? So this is how initially it was Britain, right? Again, it was challenged by the rivals like Germany, Austria, Hungary, and etc. There was an emergence of new power. known as USA, right? USA. Similarly, there was a US which got challenged by the rival power known as USSR, the terrorist organization groups, right? And finally, we have a new emerging power known as China, India, and etc. Middle power, right? So this is the pattern that we will be seeing in the international relation, which will be basically shaping our phases of international relations. All right. So, all right. Now let's see what is foreign policy, its meanings and determinants. All right. So, do you guys know who this person is? Right? Who this honorable person is? If you do so, then please comment me the name of this person. Right, comment me the name of this particular person. Who is this particular individual? Right, comment just the name. All right, so this is the man who is mainly responsible for our India's foreign policy and the stance and the position that we have today in the global arena. All right, what do I mean when I say the stand that we have in the global arena? Right, so recently there was a tussle between the Maldives and India. Right, the matter of the fact is that Maldives is very important for us strategically, geographically. Right, why? Because we are talking about Indo-Pacific, where we are seeing a rise of aggressive China. China continuously sending its vessel to keep an eye on India and its development, right, by labeling that ship as a research vessel. Right, we have seen one in Sri Lanka, we are seeing one in Maldives. The countries like Sri Lanka, Maldives under great huge debt of China. China is continuously, insidiously occupying the territories and building the ports. And that is where the importance of the neighbors comes in, right? So this is the individual who is responsible to strategically take our foreign policy stand, the position that it has today, right? So now let's see what is foreign policy. What is the definition, right? You guys can take a note of this particular definition. So foreign policy is the mechanism national governments use to guide their interaction and relationship with other countries, right? So foreign policy is a mechanism. It is an institution which a national governments use to guide our interactions and relationship with the other countries, right? From neighbors to the extended countries, right? So the major determinants of foreign policy is military power, technological power, geographical power, population, history, culture, and etc. Right? So these are the major determinants of the foreign policy that will be deciding the foreign policy and its advancements, its development in the relations of our country with the countries, right? So pause the video, note down this important definition, very simplistic. I would recommend to all of you that you create your own definition, right? I have told you the keyword that it is a mechanism, right, which the national government use in order to guide their interaction, right? So this is the framework. Using this particular terminology, you can create your own set of definition. What are the various determinants? Again, the military power, the technological power, the geography, the population, right? We are talking about demographic dividend and etc. So the population plays very crucial role, right? This is what will constitute the diaspora part of the IR, right? That is why the population as well becomes one of the very important determinant. Then comes history. You can add culture. You can add the economy, the trade, the other facets of economy and trade and etc, right? So this is what are the important determinants of the foreign policy, right? So when I say determinants of foreign policy, what do I mean? They are basically the frameworks, the important facet which will decide our relations with the other countries, right? When we engage with any other country, we not just merely interact, right? We don't just say, hey USA, how are you, right? When our foreign affairs minister, he sits with the Blinken, right, the Anthony Blinken of USA, they will basically talk about our military power. They will basically talk about the strategic issues of the world. they will basically talk about the technologies, right? Like I said, initiative on critical and emerging technology. They will talk about geography, right? How Indo-Pacific is important for the entire world. They will talk about the population. They will talk about Indian diaspora. They will talk about H-1B visa issue, right? That is the major power problem between the US and India. We will talk about history, right? So this is what are the important determinants that will basically keep two countries close abided with each other, right? So this is what a foreign policy is. This is what are the determinants of the foreign policy. All right. So all right. So I am hoping that you guys have taken a note of the definition of the foreign policy and determinants. So with this, we are binding up the today's class, right? We have seen the historical context of the IR. We have seen history of 20th century, 21st century. We have seen the definition of foreign policy and important determinants of the foreign policy, right? So let's not make this lecture longer, and we'll do it very precisely, very comfortably, and we'll complete it. All right, so with this, let's end today's class. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. And if you have liked this particular lecture, then please ensure to show your love by subscribing to the channel, that is Executive IAS, and also liking the video and sharing this one with your close ones. All right, so if you have any queries, any doubts, any recommendations, and etc., please feel free to suggest the same in the comment section. We will give, our team will give it a read, and also we will come back with a valuable feedback. All right, so with this, let's end up, and thank you so much. Keep watching, keep learning with Executive IAS.